Well,
hello and welcome. Oh,
okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. Go ahead.
Hello and welcome to the program Wine and Cheese. My name is Sheila Wilson. I'm a registered nurse and president of Stop Healthcare Violence and a host on Passionate World Talk Radio. I would like to thank Lillian Caldwell, CEO of Passionate World Radio, and Jeannie White, station manager, that posts and does all the blogs for Wine and Cheese. This episode, my guests are ER nurse Amy Smith and Liz Dalton, and I invited Jeannie White to be involved in our program tonight. We have a lot to discuss, and I will say hello to Amy. Amy?
Hello.
And that's her voice. And Liz?
Hi, everybody.
There you go. So let's get started. Question tonight. Jeannie, you were going to ask the question?
Oh, yes, I was going to ask this question here about what type of procedure, or is there a procedure when somebody gets assaulted in the hospital?
Well, I can tell you at my facility, if a staff member is assaulted, we have security and a report is taken. Certainly if you're assaulted and cannot return to work, and that doesn't mean that you're physically injured. It can be the emotional piece of it. You can be evaluated in the emergency room. The supervisor will help to work and see if they can't get you released from your shift. Now, all those things have to be requested. So if you fill out your incident report and speak to security and continue on with your shift, will someone necessarily ask you whether or not you feel like you need to be here or whether or not you think you should go home? I can't guarantee that would happen. But there is a process. You can report it to the police. Policy and procedure at the hospital encourages you to do that. We have a no-tolerance policy in place that the hospital will quasi-back you for that. I can tell you it's an intimidating process to deal with the police force in giving a report. I know the court systems, it's a challenge with the behavioral health population, if that's the population that's done the assault. If it's a regular patient population, even still, it's not like the police can come in and detain that person. They still remain your patient.
How do they protect you?
Well, you would have to then advocate for yourself to request to come off the assignment, or if you have a coworker that's willing to take over the patient, or request an evaluation to go home.
But the police can't sit with the patient after you've been assaulted?
They wouldn't necessarily stay with the patient after they were assaulted. If the patient continued to be an issue, they may be restrained by policy at our facility and medicated potentially to calm them down and contain them after the fact.
Yeah. Now, just out of curiosity, and I'm asking, and I know that I haven't asked you to search or research this or anything else, but are any of your charts marked with somebody that has assaulted a healthcare worker before?
We do have indicators on our tracker. So we have, like a name will come up in red if they've been known to be aggressive in our facility, and it has been noted by staff. So when you come in, even if you come in just for your chest pain, you're not a behavioral health patient, but you came in for a medical issue, and you're quite aggressive. And it's not just you first get there and you're anxious, that kind of aggression, but like an ongoing aggression, then a notation is made in your chart that you have the potential for aggression, and it's noted on our tracker. so that we have an indication before we approach a patient, yes.
Now, when you say a tracker, what does that mean?
On the computer, we can see the list of the patients in the rooms.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Our working worksheet, I guess, on the computer.
But it's not on his chart or her chart.
Well,
but it would have to be.
It's on their electronic chart in the computer. We don't work with paper charts.
That's right. Right.
So it's not that the indication would be when you went to go look your patient's information up, it would be noted in their electronic chart. And for us in our facility, it's denoted in red. Their name comes up in red.
So you get, when you go call for a patient, if everything is electronic, see, when I was working the ER, we would get paper charts from everybody. So we would go and call them. But now how do you get your patient from the waiting room?
Well, you look at the computer screen and their first and last name, and you go out to the waiting area and you call their name and you look at their ID bracelet to verify their name, and then you bring them back.
Right. So now you have them back, and you check on the computer, and you see that they've been aggressive before.
Well, once I looked up their name to go out to the waiting area to get them, I already know that because their name would be in red. Yes.
Okay, that's right. You told me that. Yep. So then, what do you do for your self-protection? What can the nurses do, not just you? Hey, you're going out to get.
I would assess the situation first because they may have come in their last time there. They may have been aggressive, but I would approach them and assume that they're not going to be and keep an air of caution. So you do your across-the-room assessment and decide whether or not somebody looks like they're agitated. Are they posturing? What's the look on their face? What are their arms doing? Do they appear relaxed? I mean, you kind of do your across-the-room assessment and feel, what does their voice sound like? Is it a regular tone? Is it a regular octave? Are they loud? Are they pressed in their speech? Those are things like key triggers. If they're a behavioral patient, now you're looking at, you do a little investigation. What kind of behaviors do they have? They're a paranoid schizophrenic. Okay, I'm going to approach this patient and make sure that they're not being stimulated by, it has nothing to do with me. That's a different approach. I may take somebody else with me for that. But if you're just coming in just because you're aggressive, I'm going to see how you're doing first.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
If I approach them like they're going to be agitated, I may make them agitated.
Right.
So it's
right.
It's a
now, you have gone out and picked up a patient that has a name in red, and you're assessing them, but do you share with anybody, or is that kind of a process that you tell your charge nurse, or you might tell the nurse next door to you that's working, hey, I've got somebody in red, or some code word or anything else, so you've got somebody covering your back?
Well, the nice part about the electronic tracker, the nice part about that is the charge nurse and all of my teammates, all of the nurses in the emergency department and the doctors can see the whole tracker.
Oh.
They know all of the patients in the department that have a potential that are in red.
Oh, that's awesome.
They can see the entire tracker. But if I was to come on and see a patient and I went, I think that patient's responding to some kind of external stimuli, or that patient just really seems to be a not nice person, then I'll certainly say to the tech, you know what, you want to go with me? Act like you're stuck in the room and come in with me. or you approach the patient and they're belligerent and nasty, I'll just say to the patient, so I will come back when you can be respectful, and I will be bringing somebody with me. And you just make it known. It's not acceptable for you to treat me this way. I'm sorry you're having a bad day. I'm here to care for you. But we're going to do it in a manner in which my safety is going to come first, because.
Yeah, that's damn important.
Yeah, I can't do anything if I don't have that.
Right. Liz, what would your process be now? I know you haven't been there for a while, but you worked in a unit.
Yes.
So how would you know if somebody was coming in?
Well, at the time when I was working, I don't think it's changed actually, but I don't know for absolutely sure. When the emergency room would have that also at my facility, in the emergency room, but it wouldn't translate to the Epic computer system that we had to the units or the floors. So it would be the responsibility of the nurse giving report to the nurse that's taking the patient to tell them what's happened, or that would be significant. At the time, and that would be 5 years ago, that they didn't want it to be noted on Epic. They felt that it was a privacy thing. So it was something they were going to work on. After what happened to me when I was assaulted, things did change in ways that helped alleviate some of the problems that we were experiencing at the time. Like, we had moved into a new building, and the unit that I was on previously in another part of the hospital had a locked unit. All units were locked. When we moved into the new building, it had no locked units. Absolutely, the design was poor of the new building, because they said there was not if we had locked units, there would be no egress to the outside, because there was just like a door that locked going down the stairway. So it was kind of convoluted what the hospital was saying to us, that they couldn't lock the units. After everything that happened to me, about 2 years later, they installed locked units, and they installed cameras, so that after a certain time at night, a person would have to ring the bell and they would be on camera. Because before the camera, you couldn't see who was there, and they would just walk in, and it would be, you could be blindsided, which is basically, something that happened quite a bit. But back to the tracking system, it was really a nurse-to-nurse responsibility. It also was it was communicated through my administrators, but they didn't pass it on. They had the problem with my situation was the administrators had decided that the situation before the patient was transferred to the unit, and it was with the family member, when the family member had also assaulted a doctor and verbally abusive to all the nurses, that was not communicated up to us. What it was told, that there was a situation and it had resolved. Now, that wasn't enough information, but that was only between administrators, and that didn't come out until afterwards. So it was a matter of just basically, if you didn't read the chart, where there was a social worker report, a psychiatric report, and a lot of times you don't get an opportunity to read the chart, because if you're the patient who is critically ill, who has a possibility of dying, the first thing you're going to do is treat the patient. You get your report from your nurses and you go in. So you don't really know the social problem unless your administrator came and told you,
Yes, I understand that.
I mean, on the night that happened to me, what my nurse in charge had said to me was that, they said, you were chosen by the nurse manager to take care of this family because they're having like an alteration in coping. They would have difficulty coping. And they thought that because I dealt with a lot of, that was kind of my forte, I dealt with patients that were having, alteration in coping, stress, anxiety, maybe anger, and I was able to work with them. You just have to come to their, you need to not be, telling them the way it's going to be. You have to listen to their complaints. There's a process of de-escalation that I was good at, but I didn't know the details of how bad this particular person was and how violent they were.
Well, I've transferred an awful lot of patients from the emergency room to the units and the floors, and I don't think there's a nurse that can sit down and read a chart before they take care of them. That just doesn't happen. And unless the ER nurse doesn't know their past history and everything went okay and it was like, oh, you took care of them, you got the bed assignment, and up you went, they wouldn't know either. So it sounds like, Amy, that's a good idea when people, if everybody is reported that they come out red.
Yes, I believe that does transfer to upstairs. When it initially happened, when we first were turning the names red, because the emergency department is an outpatient department, and we were on a separate computer system for a bit of time. We're now house-wide, and we're Meditech, which is, so archaic. But nonetheless, I believe we're house-wide now. It now translates, the red translates over. But I don't think it makes it easier for the behavioral health unit. We do have a locked adult behavioral health unit, and I can tell you the grievances that come out of there are scary for safety in that population.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when that population becomes medical, it becomes tenfold, because now they're unsecure on the floors and not being any better managed.
How could we in Stop Healthcare Violence help with a situation like that? If the administration doesn't hire more staff, which it sounds like that they need more staff, and I know in reality, psychiatric hospital that I went to, I was told that any male figure is hired because, number one, they're males and they act as security, but their job isn't security. It is a medical assistant.
Yeah.
Now, how does that work?
We're having a mental health technician shortage, so like a health aide, but that deals with the mental health population. In part that may be because of COVID, right? Nobody's going into these jobs right this particular moment, but they're using our nurses and our float pools and our med surge nurses. So, we'll float you to the behavioral health unit, and the nurses contractually, you have to be oriented to a unit to float and take an assignment. And so they're not taking an assignment, so that's accurate, but they can be a helper, and so they're going out of their good graces, and they're being told, well, you only have to do the 15-minute checks. That is such, if you are not comfortable with that population of patients, to wander the unit and do your 15-minute checks is a big deal. And those patients know it.
Yeah.
And so, at one point we had an argument. They weren't giving the staff keys. Well, you can't get out. There's no buzz system. You have to key yourself out while someone's coming at you. We're a closed unit in the emergency room, and I don't have to float. I am grateful.
Yeah.
But the stories that I sit with these nurses in labor management meetings and grievances, and one nurse got off the floor and moved to another floor.
Yeah.
I had a nurse come to the ER one night, and she was picked up by a patient and flung across his bed. She's still in the air, and stayed in the air until she hit the wall on the other side of the room and slid down the wall.
Wow. I work with a 35-year-old with a rod in her back, and she's been a nurse, I think, for, say, 10 years, and somewhere around year 1 or 2 in the facility that I work in, she was thrown by a patient that very same way and broke her back.
That is, and it's horrifying. And when you hear that there's no security to protect the healthcare workers,
we have security guards, but some of God love them. They're there and they're helpful, but they're my size and they're female too.
Yeah.
I know I can be strong and I feel strong, but I also know that my strength's only going to get me so far against a patient of size with true anger. True anger brings if I was truly angry and not afraid, I may have more strength.
Right.
But in that situation, I'm afraid.
Right.
So I'm not going to have the strength.
Yeah, and I with what happened to me, I was cornered in the room. There was no way for me to escape between the equipment, the bed, and the window and the door. It was on the other side. You know what I mean? So you're in a fight or flight or freeze. And I actually froze. I froze because
and you don't
I
know
just
what you're
didn't expect
do.
it.
That's right. That's awful.
But I think that as far as stop healthcare violence, the most important thing is for us to advocate for each other. The process that I went through, I had to learn on my own what I needed to do. I did have the assistance of the M&A. I was very grateful to them because they did back me up. If they hadn't backed me up initially, the hospital was denying that the situation even happened. It was so unbelievable. It was just unbelievable. I mean, so administrators need to step up to the plate, and they don't have to tell you what you need to do, but they need to support you. They need to support you and say, these are your options. This is the options that you have, okay, that I know of. And they're giving you options, so they're not pretending or trying to keep it from being reported to the Department of Public Health or to the Joint Commission or whoever, OSHA. I mean, OSHA says a lot of great things, but they can't, I did report to OSHA too, and that did get them to come in to investigate, and they had 17 items that needed to be corrected in order to, but it was who's going to check on the corrections, and the M&A took it upon themselves to check on the corrections, but also in that particular year they were in a arbitration, so they had a little bit more power.
Well, that's the exhausting part. I mean, you're not asking the hospital administration. We understand that they're physically not the ones assaulting us.
Yeah.
That it's the community of patients that we serve, and that's not their fault. But they seem to think it's our fault for being assaulted, which is mind-blowing.
That's the culture of protection in a business. That's not what abuse. I know as a hospital.
No, it's emotional abuse.
If we treated our patients like that and said, "Gee, I'm sorry that someone walked in your room in the middle of the night and tried to assault you. There's really nothing I can do." You know what I mean? Right. What would that be like? What would that be like? That would be the most horrendous thing that could happen, and to be treated like that. So it's almost like it's them against us, but they created that wall. They created this wall of self-serving, numbers, budgets, not people, not humans.
Mm-hmm.
And I always thought to myself, when I used to be on these different committees and stuff, clinical practice committees and stuff like that, one of the biggest things that I said was that, like, we need to treat the nurses, like, we want our nurses to treat patients a certain way, but why aren't we treating the nurses with the same respect? Why don't we ever say, wow, that was a wonderful job that you did. You worked together as a team. You know what I mean? There was there was only criticism. And I'm like, you can't expect someone to be criticized all the time and never ever tell them that they've done well and make them feel good about themselves so that they will make their patients feel better as well. It's set by example. You know, that was my philosophy, particularly precepting new nurses, you know. You want them to feel good about their performance, you know.
Well, I always laugh because our hospital has a banner that flies out front. Like they got some award for some safety measure. My CEO earned that from his desk. Wow, impressive.
Yeah.
I mean, and so I make mention of it every time I send an email regarding the safety of our hospital or the nasty tools and tones. You know, they talk about using your tools and tones when, like, lateral communication. I'm constantly calling out the managers on their tools and tones. You know, you can't even get your own management to follow your own
policies and procedures. Yeah,
exactly. But even your, like, personality style, you know, your wanting of safety and all these things. It's ridiculous.
No, I'm just. Go ahead, Liz.
I was just going to make one comment too, just in that Vine. We had worked on the Beacon Award. It was all nurses that wrote all the documentation, that did all the policies, implemented safety procedures, and all these different things to get a Beacon Award for the hospital. So that the hospital could also then become a what do you call it? That big award of hospitals. I'm drawing.
A Lansing Award?
No, Magnet Hospital.
Oh,
okay.
yeah.
We call it Maggot. Maggot.
Well, what happened was all nurses worked on this for a long time, and they got it, okay? And then that led to their magnet status. Okay, not one nurse was thanked for any of that. Right. And what happens when you have a magnet status is that there has to be a certain percentage of nurses, employees, and that are satisfied with their job. Okay, so to me it was such a, it's a contradiction because nobody was thanked for that. Only the hospital was like, we have the Beacon Award. Do you know what I mean? So now they applied for magnet status and they got it, you know?
Exactly.
So,
but nurses will run to work for them in their magnet status.
Yeah.
So I mean, it becomes a twofold for our profession. It's so difficult because you want to work for somebody who's going to further your career, especially if you can work for a hospital where there's movement.
Right.
Right. And yet you feel like in some parts you're selling your soul to a corporation.
Yeah.
That is going to then, what's the word I want to use? Exploit our profession.
Yeah. Yeah.
For their own financial gain.
Yeah. I mean, I saw people that I worked with on the floor. I worked on cardiac step down originally when I first went into nursing, and a lot of the same nurses that I started with, you know, they furthered their career, they furthered their education, okay, and they had the same complaints that I did at the time to try to make things better for our patients, for our the treatment of nurses and our safety and stuff like that. The higher they went up on the chain of administration, then, nurse director, then nurse CEO, they were completely different people. completely different people and what they believed in, their real, like their whole, just their idea of what was important completely changed. And the only time I really could admire someone that did that kind of thing is if they kept their original integrity, and it was all about patient safety, nurse safety, and working cooperatively with other providers like doctors and PCAs and trying to help that whole situation of us working together. But I don't admire anyone that doesn't have the original integrity for nursing that they had when they started.
Agree.
Yeah, and you hate to see them change.
Yeah, only because I don't respect that. I just can't respect it, So I'm not a perfect person. I don't expect them to be perfect. I know they have commitments that they have to meet with their budgets and their satisfaction, and they don't want any difficulties. They don't want anything on their back to be criticized for. But, it comes a time in your life that, especially, you're getting older when you get into these better positions that are paying more money and stuff like that, but you just don't ever forget the bottom line is providing really good care to patients and also being happy to do it,
Right. Just out of curiosity, Amy, you may, I don't know if you know the answer to this, but your CEO must have a board meeting with the community. Or is it just the stockholders?
I would assume they do some kind of community something at some point. Being that it's a COVID year, I doubt they've done anything.
Yeah, and I'm sure
they've had
probably
a
all
Zoom
about
meeting.
Fundraising.
Well, yeah,
right.
It's all about donations, right? And they're getting grants and allocations that way.
Yeah.
They're getting state-funded money.
Do you have in your hospital any workplace violence committee meetings? Ones that you can do on Zoom, or is that even mentioned?
We do have a safety committee, and we have two of our emergency room nurses on our safety committee, and they meet with security, and I'm not sure who else. I believe our CNO goes to that. Some of the managers go because our manager tried to say that we didn't need to have, we've got 3 spaces for M&A members on the committee. And so we've got 1 from upstairs in the house and then 2 from the emergency room because it's volunteer. That's volunteer to do it. And so my manager was like, well, those nurses don't need to go because I go. And we're like, yes, and you relay nothing. So thank you, but no thank you, and you have to release them. So that's her biggest gripe is that they are day nurses, and she has to release them to attend their meeting once a month or once every other month, however they're working it.
Yeah, that's part of the job.
Yeah.
That's what you're there
for.
But we have to enforce all of those things, and the nurses that go really have to fight, and they have to know when their meeting is. They have to insist for them to be released. They have
Why
to.
Is it so difficult?
Because we're not respected as a team member. We are just the people being told what to do. We are not. Our view isn't respected, even though we're the ones that have to carry out the actual policy. We have to be the ones to say that's feasible. I can legally attain that. Some things they ask us to do, and I think, are you kidding? You take my license now. That's not legally possible for me to be that liable for that person who has free will. And yet I am, and I've accepted the assignment.
Amy, give an example for the people that are listening. Something.
If you choose to come into my hospital and you're feeling very distraught, and you make statements that you're sad, we set you up and we get you ready to, you're going to need to be medically cleared first. Then you're going to be seen by our behavioral team. They're going to decide the best course of action for you. And you're feeling a little labile right now. But now you get there and you realize this process, it actually can take days. And legally, I'm going to tell you, you can't leave now because you've decided, you know what, it's been a day or two, the stress is gone, your kids are now fine, you know, whatever the situation was has now been de-escalated. You've slept. Maybe you hadn't slept in days. You've gotten some rest. Maybe the doctor gave you a little medicine. You're feeling good. I'm over it. I'm ready to go. Okay, but you still legally can't because your 3 days of inpatient hold on a Section 12 does not start until you hit inpatient. And so you're in my emergency room on a hold until that happens. But you don't want to be there anymore. And it's my job to make sure you stay for your safety. And I have to keep you on a, I don't know, our stretchers or what, maybe 6.5 feet by 4 feet? Does that sound fair? I don't know, 3 feet?
Yeah, that might be. Yeah, a regular stretcher. Yep. They're there for 3 days, 4 days sometimes.
Hospital stretcher. You're going to sit on that in our hallway, and now you've got a mask on your face. And that's it. That's all you have.
That's right. That's right. No television.
Right, but legally my responsibility is to make sure you stay.
Yeah.
So now she decides she's not going to stay.
She's not going to stay. She's belligerent and she wants to leave. Now my hospital policy says to let you leave and call the police. And at the end of the day, as a seasoned nurse, I will step aside and let you walk out. I'm not going to put myself in harm's way. But in the battle of argument and time taken to try to convince you, and now the incident report, and hospital administration likely is going to come back and say, what could you have done better? You should have medicated that patient sooner. You should have de-escalated that patient sooner. You should have secured that patient sooner. The liability ends up on me.
Right.
That's huge.
Right.
Because that was my job to keep that patient safe. I took that patient assignment. In my department, I could also be running a code and that patient is dinging off and now, I mean, I'm not, right? In all fairness, I'm not directly involved, but it's still my assignment.
Right.
So I still have to deal with it at the end of the day.
Yeah, and basically what it does is escalate the patient then again.
Right. So, you know, it becomes a challenge. Or you come in and you have dementia.
Yeah.
I'm liable for that too. Now you're beating the tar out of me because you're a confused elderly patient. But you're sick. You're so sick, and I need you to stay on this monitor, and I need that IV to stay in your arm, and I need you to be a good patient, but you're sick and your mind is sick, and you don't know.
Yeah.
And you've got a fever on top of it, and you're confused at baseline. But I'm still liable if you fall on the floor and break a hip.
Right.
Right. So you have to wait for the physician to see, and there may be 7 patients before he's going to be seeing this patient before you can medicate him.
Yeah, we can apply behavioral restraints. I mean, we have guidelines in place to try to keep you safe, but still there's a liability to that. So if I don't have a sitter that can sit one-on-one with my elderly patient in restraints, it's a catch-22. Are they going to hang themselves trying to slide through a side rail because nobody's watching them in that restraint? Or do they fall and break a hip because they made it over?
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
So
well, ladies,
both sides.
I think our time is coming to an end. And I would just like, Amy, you are absolutely amazing. Liz, you are also just to come on and to update everybody, to inform the public what truly is happening. And I want to thank Lillian Caldwell. As I said, she's the CEO of Passionate World Talk Radio, and Jeannie White, station manager. So does anybody have any last words that they want to say?
I would just like to say that, we're coming into our second wave of COVID, and I just wish that everyone stays safe, wears their mask, continue to wash your hands and protect yourselves, protect your family, and, when you go into the hospital, hopefully, you're going to meet a wonderful nurse who's going to make you feel better and make you feel safe. And that's what it's all about. We want to take care of our patients. And all my love and all my thoughts and prayers go to all the healthcare providers that are going to be going through this next wave. You're all in my thoughts and my prayers.
That's awesome.
Absolutely.
Amy?
I second that sentiment, absolutely. Stay safe. Enjoy your families, but in a safe distance. And just, be safe.
And you, Amy, better be safe. You're in there. You're out there working with all the COVID patients.
We have our equipment. We are using it. So for the time being, patients need to understand that we will ask them to repeat themselves, because you put a mask on your mouth and your ears don't work as well. That is true.
Yeah. My ears don't work as well without a mask, too, with my grandson.
Exactly. But be patient with us. We are there to care for you. And it does look cumbersome. It is as cumbersome as it looks, but we're doing our best.
Yeah.
You are awesome. God love you.
Thanks, Sheila.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jean.
And, okay. Good night, everybody.
Good night. This is Jeannie White from Passionate World Talk Radio. Thank you for listening. You can always listen to this further. We're all on Spotify, Apple, or on Amazon Music. So these shows, you can hear them in different types of podcasts. Again, thank you, everyone. Bye now.